We really appreciate you sending in all this information on that big airline's move towards sustainable aviation fuel, or SF.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case.
It really is. It's such a critical area, obviously, and this example seems like it offers some really valuable lessons.
It does. I mean, as you know, the pressure's really on for industries like aviation. They've got to seriously tackle their carbon footprint.
Definitely.
And this airline deciding to embrace SF, it's not just PR, is it? It feels like a real response to, regulations and what passengers are starting to expect, greener options.
Exactly. But, like the sources you sent clearly show, switching to SAF, it's not simple.
Yeah.
It's not like just, changing your coffee supplier.
Not at all.
You've got these big hurdles. Cost is a huge one, right? And the supply of SAF is still pretty limited, plus all the infrastructure changes needed at airports. It's massive. So our goal here in this deep dive is to really unpack how this airline tackled all that.
Right.
We want to look at their strategy, the actual steps they took, and, what the impact has really been. And we've got a super detailed picture, thanks to everything you shared. Covers the whole journey, pretty much.
From start to, where they are now.
Yeah. Okay, so kicking things off.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear the airline wasn't, ignoring the elephant in the room, or the hangar, I guess.
Yeah.
Aviation is a big emitter.
Yeah.
They knew that. And they were feeling the heat, weren't they? From lawmakers, from passengers who care about the environment.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, I think, is their main strategy wasn't trying to, invent some miracle fuel all by themselves.
No.
Instead, they seem to recognize, the power of working together, collaboration.
Okay.
So they formed these really key partnerships. One was with a company that actually produces SF.
Right, the source.
And the other was with a firm that specializes in airport fuel logistics, getting the fuel where it needs to go.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
And what's insightful there, I think, is that it wasn't just some loose agreement. It suggests they understood that making this work needs expertise across the whole chain. Production, transport, blending, getting it into the plane.
Right. You can't just wish the fuel into the wings.
Yeah.
You need a reliable supply, and you need the systems to handle it properly.
Exactly.
So this three-way partnership, it was aimed at solving those core challenges, like getting a steady flow of SAF, figuring out how to blend it properly with regular jet fuel, which I imagine involves some pretty careful calculations.
Oh, definitely. Very precise.
And then making sure the airports could actually, manage it, the pipes, the tanks, all that.
Precisely. And your sources specifically mention joint investments as being really key.
Okay, so shared skin in the game.
Exactly. That shared financial commitment, it signals a deep level of buy-in, doesn't it? Suggests they were looking long-term, not just for a quick fix. And they also smartly tapped into government incentives, which, let's be honest, are often pretty crucial for getting these greener techs off the ground economically, especially early on.
Sure, helps bridge that cost gap.
And the focus on innovative blending techniques is interesting, too. It sort of implies they weren't just accepting the current limits on how much SAF you can mix in, but they were actively looking for ways to maybe push those boundaries a bit.
And this whole effort, it wasn't just about being green, was it? The info makes it clear they were also really focused on just keeping the airline running smoothly day to day.
Absolutely critical.
You can't just ground everything while you wait for some perfect 100% sustainable fuel that doesn't exist yet.
No way.
Plus, they clearly understood how important public perception is by being really open about their SAF commitment.
Yeah.
They're not only trying to attract those eco-conscious travelers, but also kind of positioning their whole brand for the future.
Yeah.
A more sustainable future.
Totally. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, that kind of proactive communication, it isn't just about feeling good.
Yeah.
Well, in a market that's getting more and more eco-aware, an airline that can actually show it's committed to sustainability, that can be a real competitive edge. It could influence which airline people choose, maybe even attract big corporate clients who have their own ESG targets, environmental, social governance goals.
Ah, okay. So they've identified the problem. They've got their strategy with these partnerships. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. How did they actually lay the groundwork? The material you sent breaks down their methodology, starting with deep market research and a feasibility study. Sounds like step one for anything this big.
Absolutely. You just can't make smart investments or strategic calls without really understanding the landscape, right? Both now and looking ahead.
Makes sense.
So their market research, it involved digging into, how much S is actually being produced now, who the potential suppliers are, and crucially, the costs, both current and projected.
Okay, so trying to look into the crystal ball a bit on pricing.
Kind of, yeah. They didn't just look at today's price tag, they tried to forecast the trends to see what the economic hit might look like long term.
Hmm.
And they also carefully evaluated the full life cycle emissions. That's key. Comparing SAF to conventional jet fuel, but considering everything producing the SAF, transporting it, not just burning it.
Right, because you don't want to, like, solve one problem by just creating another one somewhere else in the chain.
Exactly.
And I guess they didn't just pick the first company that popped up saying, we make SAF.
Probably not, no. The feasibility study likely involved a really rigorous check of potential suppliers. Could they actually scale up production enough? Airlines need a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
Plus, digging into historical SAF prices and how quickly other airlines were adopting it, that gives you a benchmark, a sense of where things are heading.
And the logistics.
Yeah.
Can't forget those. Integrating a new fuel into this super complex existing system that needs serious planning.
Totally. They had to really assess their current set up storage tanks, pipelines, those refueling trucks, and figure out what needed upgrading or what new stuff they had to invest in.
Right.
The material even mentioned they did comparative studies on different SAF feedstocks.
Feedstocks, like what it's made from?
Yeah. Things like used cooking oil, waste oils, even potentially algae-based biofuels or synthetic fuels, sometimes called e-fuels.
Wow. Waste oils and algae. Still sounds a bit sci-fi, but it's actually happening.
It is. And each of those feedstocks has its own pluses and minuses,
Yeah.
right? Cost, how easy it is to scale up, the actual environmental benefit. So analyzing all that was probably critical for their long-term plan.
And it's interesting, they talk to such a wide range of experts. Industry consultants, sustainability specialists, even the regulators. It just underlines how complicated this whole transition is. You meet all those different viewpoints.
And that engagement with the regulators, that was super crucial. It leads right into their whole regulatory and compliance strategy. Because aviation operates under incredibly strict safety rules. You can't mess around with fuel. And now, environmental rules are becoming just as important. So navigating that whole web of regulations, getting approvals for SAF, that's a massive job in itself.
So they worked really closely with the aviation authorities, and these sustainability certification groups.
They had to.
The materials specifically mentioned sticking to ASTM standards. Now, for listeners maybe not familiar, those are the big technical standards, right? They ensure fuel quality, performance, safety.
That's right, globally recognized. And they also followed IATA guidelines. That's the International Air Transport Association. They have protocols for aviation sustainability, too.
And getting those approvals, it's not just paperwork, is it? It's fundamental. You can't legally use the fuel in commercial flights without them.
Absolutely fundamental. And the fact that this airline also got actively involved in, industry policy discussions, that's quite telling.
How so?
It suggests they weren't just sitting back and waiting for rules to be handed down. They were trying to actively shape a better environment, a more supportive one, for SAF across the whole industry.
Proactive. And it wasn't just domestic rules either, was it? As a big international airline, they had to talk to bodies like EASA over in Europe and the FAA here in the U.S. to make sure everything lined up globally. That level of international coordination sounds, well, exhausting.
Probably was. Absolutely. And the info you provided also highlighted their commitment to complying with carbon offset programs, specifically Corsia.
Ah, yes, Corsia.
That's a really important global scheme. It's designed to help offset emissions from international flights while the industry makes this big shift towards cleaner tech like ASAF, so it shows they're tackling emissions on multiple fronts.
Okay, so they've done the homework, they're navigating the red tape. Now comes the really physical part, actually getting ASAF into their planes. That's where the supply chain and infrastructure work comes in, and where that fuel logistics partner must have been vital.
Exactly, because putting a new fuel like SAF into an existing airport system that was built for traditional jet fuel, that takes serious investment and really careful planning.
Right.
The material talks about them collaborating on building specialized blending facilities right at the airport.
Now, that's usually mixed, right? Not pure SF.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially now. So you need places to blend it accurately. And they had to upgrade existing fuel storage tanks to handle SF, set up efficient distribution networks to get the fuel where it needed to be on time. What's really clear is the level of coordination needed between the airline, the SF producer, the airport operators. Everyone has a part to play to make it smooth and reliable.
So it's not just about having a different liquid. The whole system around it has to adapt. And this collaboration, it helped create a more streamlined, more secure supply chain. which you definitely need for SAF to be consistently available at the big airports, the hubs.
For sure. And the decision to get dedicated SAF storage at certain key airports, that was smart.
Why did they?
Well, it minimizes the risk of contaminating the F with regular jet fuel, and it just makes the whole blending process easier, more efficient.
Okay.
The material also mentioned they took a phased approach. Started using SF on key international routes first, then presumably expanded.
A gradual rollout.
Yeah, that likely let them manage the complexity, you know, learn as they went and scale things up over time in a more controlled way. Sensible?
Okay, but all this sounds incredibly expensive. We know SAF generally costs more than traditional jet fuel, sometimes a lot more. So how did they deal with the money side? That's where this economic viability and cost optimization piece comes in.
Yeah, this is absolutely critical for any big sustainability project. The info you shared points to like a multi-pronged financial strategy.
Okay.
First, they actively went after and apparently got government subsidies, tax breaks, and they participated in carbon credit programs.
Right, using the available support.
Exactly. These financial tools are often specifically designed to bridge that cost gap between old fuels and the greener alternatives, making it actually possible economically. What's interesting is how proactive they seem to have been in finding and using these. Suggests they really understood the policy landscape.
Yeah, you got to know where the money is.
Yeah.
Government support can be a game changer, especially early on. The material also mentioned they negotiated bulk buying agreements for SAF.
That's right. Buying in larger quantities usually gets you a better price per gallon, right?
Usually.
And it also helps lock in a more predictable supply for the long term, which is super important when you're dealing with a market like SAF that's still developing.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there's this other kind of innovative approach, partnerships with corporate clients and environmentally focused groups.
How'd that work?
Well, by creating these sustainable travel programs, companies could choose flights that are supported by SAF, maybe offset their business travel emissions that way.
Ah, so creating a specific demand.
Exactly. The airline basically creates a dedicated market for greener travel and potentially shares some of that extra cost of SAF with companies that want to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's a really smart way to build the market and create like shared value.
That is clever. It drives demand and helps the economics work better.
Yeah.
And the material also mentioned the more maybe traditional stuff, like always looking for ways to be more fuel efficient generally.
Oh, yeah.
Optimizing flight paths, reducing unnecessary fuel burn. Every little bit helps, right?
Absolutely. Those operational tweaks, they don't just cut overall fuel use and emissions.
Right.
They also help offset some of those higher SAF costs. It's about finding savings and efficiencies everywhere you can. Attack the problem from multiple angles.
Okay, so they're getting the fuel, they're managing the costs.
Yeah.
But how do you bring the public along
Yeah.
and use this to, boost your brand? That's the public awareness and brand positioning part.
Yeah, and this is where good communication is just essential. The material you sent details a pretty comprehensive PR campaign designed to, educate travelers about what SAF is, why it's good, and really highlight the airline's commitment to cutting its footprint.
How'd they do that?
Use a mix of channels, it seems. Digital marketing, press releases, working with environmental groups to get the message out.
Yeah.
What seems notable is the focus on being transparent, on educating people. That builds trust, especially when consumers are getting pretty savvy about greenwashing claims.
Good point. And they didn't just talk the talk, right? They did things like changing their loyalty programs, rewarding passengers who picked SAF-supported flights.
Yeah, offering bonus miles or other perks if you choose the greener option. That gives people a real, tangible incentive and shows the commitment is genuine.
Makes sense.
And by actively partnering with corporations to promote SAF-enabled travel and sustainable tourism, they're reaching beyond just individual flyers.
Right.
Getting businesses to prioritize eco-friendly travel for their employees, that can create really significant demand for SAF and help drive it forward.
Okay, all this sounds great in theory, but what about the actual results? Did it work? The material then gets into the data validation, right? Looking at the real impact, starting with emissions reduction.
This is where, the rubber meets the runway, so to speak. The airline put in place a really rigorous system to track its fuel use and the carbon emissions that come with it.
And the big finding.
The key finding, according to your sources, was a pretty substantial reduction, somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% in life cycle carbon emissions when using F compared to the old stuff.
Wow, 60 to 80%. That's significant.
It really is a big step towards their goals. And what adds weight to it is that these numbers were apparently verified independently, third-party audits.
Okay, so transparency.
Exactly, for accountability. They also integrated some advanced carbon tracking tech for like real-time analysis, lets them keep monitoring and tweaking things.
And what about performance? Did the planes fly okay? Any safety concerns with this new fuel blend? That's always going to be a question in aviation.
A huge question. So they looked closely at operational performance metrics. And
And the flight tests they ran with the SF blends showed that the planes performed just as well. Engine efficiency, how much fuel they burned, overall safety, all on par with conventional fuel.
that's crucial.
Absolutely. And regular maintenance checks also confirmed this app wasn't causing any problems for the engines or other important parts.
Okay.
That data is just vital for showing S is safe and viable as a drop-in replacement. And the fact that they're now apparently looking into increasing the blend percentage, that suggests they're getting more confident in it.
Okay, and finally, how did the market react? Did passengers actually care about this? So they looked at market response, customer feedback.
Yeah, they wanted to know if it was resonating, and the data suggests it was.
Really?
Passenger surveys, booking info. They apparently saw a noticeable jump in ticket sales, something like 15% for the flights where SAF was integrated.
15%, that's not nothing.
No, it indicates a real level of consumer support for greener flying. They also saw more interest from those corporate clients, the ones with the ESG targets we talked about. Right, validating that program.
Exactly. And what's also encouraging is the positive buzz they got, social media, direct customer feedback. It suggests these sustainability efforts really are building loyalty, especially with travelers who care about the environment.
It really shows that doing good for the planet can actually be good for business, too. The material wraps up by highlighting some key achievements, starting with a big milestone in cutting emissions.
Yeah, successfully getting SAF integrated into 10% of their total fuel use within just 2 years, that's a really significant achievement in this industry.
10% in 2 years feels fast for aviation.
It's pretty ambitious. And the material rightly connects this to those bigger international climate goals and really positions the airline as a pioneer. It's concrete progress, not just talk.
And that leadership, it got noticed.
Yeah.
Awards and stuff.
Yep, apparently received multiple industry awards for sustainability leadership, which, okay, boosts the brand image, but it also gives them a real competitive advantage. It helps attract passengers, attract corporate clients who are specifically looking for sustainable options.
Right. And beyond the green image and awards, there were actual economic and regulatory wins, too.
Seems so. Those government incentives, the tax benefits, the corporate partnerships they built, they apparently helped offset a pretty big chunk of the initial SAF costs. That makes the whole thing more financially sustainable for the airline itself, long term.
So it paid off financially, too, to some extent.
To some extent, yeah. And furthermore, because they were so proactive in talking with the regulators, they actually got a voice in shaping future policies around aviation sustainability that could potentially create an even better environment for their efforts down the road and really cements their leadership role.
So wrapping this up, for you, the listener, what are the big takeaways from this whole deep dive into this airline's SAF journey? It really sounds like a complex machine with lots of moving parts.
It absolutely is. I mean, this case study really hammers home how complex it is to shift to sustainable practices, especially in a huge global industry like aviation.
Yeah.
It's clearly not just about finding one green magic bullet. It takes building real strategic partnerships, across the whole value chain. It takes commitment to solid research, meticulous planning,
Navigating all that regulation.
skillfully navigating incredibly complex regulations, yeah, and communicating authentically with the public. What's really insightful, I think, is seeing how all those pieces connect and reinforce each other. Like public support might strengthen their hand when talking to suppliers or policymakers.
And a critical role of data. Verifiable data. You can't just say you're doing good, you have to prove it.
Exactly. Measure your impact accurately, show your work transparently. That builds trust, drives more progress. Plus, it is genuinely encouraging to see that real sustainability efforts can connect with the market, create that positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
Honestly, this airline's experience, it offers a pretty valuable blueprint, doesn't it, for other industries facing similar sustainability challenges and opportunities. It shows that if you take a comprehensive approach, a strategic one, a collaborative one, significant, meaningful progress really is possible.
So thinking about everything we've touched on, the tech side with fuel production, changing consumer attitudes, the shifting sands of regulation, it makes you wonder, for you listening, what do you see as maybe the single biggest hurdle or perhaps the most exciting opportunity for getting sustainable practices widely adopted. Not just in aviation, but across different sectors. It's fascinating, isn't it, how all these different threads need to come together to really make a difference. Thanks for diving deep with us today.